Good evening, everybody, and welcome to webinar number 84. Tonight, we're looking at time management. I'm going to hand over to you, Siobhan, and I'm going to read the chat.
Okay, fabulous. Thanks, Kelly. Interesting, isn't it? I'm wondering about the whole time management scenario here, because we had quite a lot of people register for tonight. And so actually we don't have that many people arrived. So I'm thinking, are they going to be late? So they've not managed their time very well? Or is it because they've got so much else to do? They've missed it and thought, well, I can watch it back at another time. Or, you know, why is it? But as you say, we're down on our team members, aren't we? Because so many team members have got assignments to finish tonight or whatever. So, or they're still at work, as some of the team members. So maybe it's that, or maybe it's because Helen said it's beautiful sunshine here. I mean, I think Helen's in Bradford, so beautiful sunshine, and the Welsh people said no, it's pouring down with rain. I thought maybe the beautiful sunshine has stopped people coming inside. But we are much lower on numbers than I was thinking. So that's very interesting when you think that tonight is all about time management. So tonight, our session, it is our 84th webinar, I think, tonight, and we're going to be looking at time management with some advice for social workers. For students, we've got some specific advice, maybe from new workers, for some very experienced workers. I've been a social worker for 32, coming up 33 years, and I'm going to learn from tonight, I know. So in terms of how we decide on our topics for the webinars, sometimes it'll be something that one of you has emailed in and asked us to do. Sometimes it comes from our WhatsApp group chat. And this one came from the fact that people were always, our team were always helping each other out with ideas for time management. And I know it's something that I need to develop in terms of time management. And I watched one of Kayleigh's YouTube videos and learnt loads from it. And so I said, look, we could ask Kayleigh Rose to come and talk to us about time management, and we could put something together. So tonight, what you're going to hear from is, none of us are specific time management experts. None of us have got training in time management or here's how to deliver time management. What we're going to share with you tonight is our ideas, our hints, our tips, what we've learned, what works well for us. So you're going to hear from people who are actively in busy social work roles or student social workers about how we manage our time. What we want you to do, and the reason why we like it when people attend live, is we would love you to use the chat tonight to share your own time management challenges. What struggles do you have in terms of time management, and what hints and tips, what works for you? Have you found something that, oh, this was brilliant, I tried this and it worked really well? Anything like that, use the chat to share your challenges and your ideas, because as you know, everybody who attends live gets a follow-up email, and Kultuma tonight will be making some notes about the session and learning from the session to email that out to you at the weekend when your certificates come out, and so I'm sure that Kultuma will also take a look at what's going on in the chat. If anybody's got any top tips in the chat, then we'll share those as well. I suppose I want to start off by saying that actually contemporary social work is incredibly challenging, and there might at times be organisations where there are unrealistic expectations about the work that you can do, the number of people that you can support, the number of families that you can work with. However good your time management skills are, you might still become overwhelmed. So I suppose what I'm wanting to say is, I think sometimes where people have so much on that they're finding it really difficult to manage, sometimes they might be told, oh, it's your time management. Actually, your time management could be brilliant and it's still unworkable, the amount that you've been given to do. And I think that that's becoming an increasing phenomena, if you like, within social work, that we're being given so much work to do. I was reading the other day about the Department for Education's the way that they calculate the average caseload for children's social workers in England. And I don't think anybody, actually, any practicing social worker in England believes that average caseload statistic that's coming from the Department for Education. So we know that people are doing more and more and more work. We know that one of the issues that has come out of the COVID-19 pandemic really is work intensification within social work. That means being expected to do more with less, and that's happening more and more in social work. So I suppose I want to start off by saying we're coming at it from that angle. That said, there are still things that all of us can do to improve our time management, and there are some hints and tips that we're going to share with you tonight that we hope that you will find useful. So we'll start off with our first tip. A lot of these have come from the WhatsApp group. Some of them have come from things that work for me. When Kayleigh Rose comes in, she's going to tell you things that work for her. So we've tried to make sure that there's a whole spread across the evening. But I suppose the starting one is use your online calendar effectively. I think it's really important that we do this because in the past, this is coming from a social worker who's been a social worker for 32, coming up for 33 years. I still use a paper diary, if I'm honest. So I still back up my online calendar with a paper diary because I'm so used to doing that. But back in the day when everything was paper diary, then what you would do in your paper diary is you would just write down visits that you needed to do, meetings that you needed to go to, and the rest of your diary was where you did your admin tasks. But when that happens now on an online calendar, if all you're doing is putting in just your visits and just your meetings, you're going to get more and more work put in. People are going to book things into your online calendar, and you've got to start to put in all of your admin tasks, everything that you're doing. Show that your online calendar is full. Make sure it clearly represents what you're doing. One of the things that as a team we feel we're maybe not always doing is as we move away from doing everything in one place, so sitting at a computer, maybe working from home, doing everything, clicking from one meeting into another, don't forget to add travel time into your diary, because we've got so unused to doing that actually now we've got to add that travel time in. I'm going to ask you to tell us in the chat about how you use your online calendar. Now, this is what Becky said. Becky said this. I don't know if you're happy for me to read it out for you, Becky, but Becky said, in this virtual world where just about bloody everyone can see your diary. And Becky said, are you going to leave that in? I'm like, yes, because it shows that it is how it feels. Everyone can get into your diary and see it. Then Becky says, I make sure that I've got a recurring half hour in my day marked for lunch. And I try to be really strict about rejecting meetings if anyone puts them in during that time. I also usually add in an extra half hour to some meetings that I'm chairing to try and allow time for me to write up the minutes straight away. And that's really important, is think about if you've got a meeting from, I don't know, 10 till 11, put it into your online calendar as starting at 10 to 10 and finishing at 20 past 11. You need some time to prepare for that meeting. Don't just click in and think, oh goodness, what am I doing now? You need to be tuned into what you're doing, the purpose of it. That will actually save you time in the long run. If you take 10 minutes in your online calendar to be prepared for something, it will save you time in the long run because you'll be better prepared when you go into that session. I think it's really important that you think about that idea that Becky's given you there. Make sure you put in all your admin tasks. As I said, I was with a group of newly qualified workers recently, and we were having a conversation about how to use your online diary and what are you doing with your online calendar. And one of those newly qualified workers said that they've added half an hour a week into their diary that they've listed as professional curiosity. They said that their team manager never touches that, never tries to take that out. And it's important, isn't it, to remember, because serious case reviews tell us a loss of professional curiosity is incredibly dangerous, then titling it as professional curiosity in your diary is particularly helpful. She was basically talking about reflective time, but detailing it as professional curiosity. So we'd be interested to hear in the chat, what do you put in your online calendar? What works well for you? Maybe what difficulties do you have with your online calendar? We thought we'd start tonight in terms of time management, just thinking about that online calendar. Okay, some other tips. Becky's talked there about making sure that lunch is marked in the diary. For me, it's one of the most important things that you can do in terms of your time management, and yet so many social workers let go of it. it's really important that you take your lunch. Self-care, it's just really important. Sometimes it's the first thing to go when we're busy. And we know we've done webinars on self-care. We've talked about the need for self-care and kindness to yourself, all of that. In our WhatsApp group, Jenna said, I keep a desktop daily planner and I tick off my daily activities as the day progresses. And within it, I set aside an hour each day for self-care. So I said, oh, that's great, Jenna. Can you send us a picture? That'd be lovely. Put a picture, and I can put a picture on the slides. And then she popped this into the WhatsApp group, and the whole team were laughing, saying, that looks like a really busy week then, Jenna. My view is I think Jenna ripped off what she's been doing in the week. She didn't necessarily want us to see what was going on in the week. So this is like a clear week, but it's a very lovely way of looking at the week. I also have something just like that here, look, sitting on my desk. I'm not going to hold it up. I'm not going to show you a picture, because I write things in there like that I might not want people to see. But you've got something that's just a quick glance as to reminding you as to what's coming up or something can be really helpful. You also need to think about planning ahead. Now, this was Tony Lee's advice in our WhatsApp group. Tony Lee said, because I asked what works for you, you know, so that was kind of what I was asking for in the WhatsApp chat. And Tony Lee said, I find it helpful to plan ahead and to break things down into smaller chunks in order of priority. And that way, if something unexpected or urgent comes up, I can reshift my day accordingly and I can still get those main things done. And I think Kayleigh Rose is going to talk to us in a bit more detail about kind of techniques that you can use for that. But I do think that's a really good idea from Tony Lee. One of the issues, of course, is we've got to be flexible with that planning ahead. However well we plan, however well we complete our online calendar, however well we diary ahead, the thing about social work is the only thing that is certain in our work is uncertainty. So there's going to be something thrown in. There's going to be a meeting that's thrown in, or a task that's thrown in, or somebody's going to phone you up with a crisis or an emergency that might take up nearly all of your day, and it throws out everything else. So there needs to be flexibility within that. So when you're building in your time management skills, you do need to maintain that flexibility within it. Then we got from the team, we got some specific time management tips that I think relate more to being a student. Well, I think they do. If you qualified and you think actually this could be useful for me as well, then that's okay. I saw these as when they were coming from the team, I thought these are really very relevant for students. So Dave said, have someone to be accountable to, a study friend. It's helpful having someone who can check in on you and keep you on track. And that's exactly what we've done with Dave tonight. We have sent him off away from our chat. He's normally in the chat, getting everything going in the chat. We've sent him off to go and do his essay, and he's accountable to the whole team if that essay doesn't get finished off. So we have helped Dave take his own advice there, really. Kulchuma said, and I think this is really important, if you're entitled to extra time, then take it. Don't add pressure on yourself. Lots of students will be entitled to additional time. Take that additional time. If you don't take it, you're the one that's losing out. And so you'll add extra pressure onto yourself. So take the time, use the time. And then I'm not sure who it was who said it, and I don't know if it was actually anybody who said it or if it was me that thought I'm going to add this in because it's a specific hint for students, but don't procrastinate too much. Don't do that. Don't just, you know, sit and think about, oh, I need to do this. I need to wash the windows before I write this assignment. I need to. Kelly and Kulchuma have both been role modeling that for us as a group recently, because they have taken whole days to go into a study room in the library in their university that then stops them from doing all of that other stuff that's surrounding them, keeping focused on it. So if you are a student, one of the best ways of managing your time is to find a place where you're not going to be distracted by other stuff. When I've got to write to deadlines, then I will go and find a space where I can't be distracted by other things. So I think finding a space can be a really important part actually of your team management, of your time management. So we know that there are lots of students here tonight, and we reckon you must have some top time management tips. So put them in the chat. We want to hear from you, as I said. And then maybe my bit of advice for time management is to keep a notepad handy. I find that I often think about something that I need to do if I'm in the shower, or when I'm in bed. Nearly always when I'm in bed, there's something that comes to my mind. Oh, I haven't done that and I've got to do that. And I need to find somewhere to write down that I need to do that, because one of my big issues is I'll forget, and then I'll remember it again at an inappropriate time again. So for me, I think it can be really handy to keep some sort of notepad to hand, so that if you're falling asleep, if you're out somewhere, if you're wherever you are, you can just jot it down, the things to be done as you remember them. I'm probably being a bit old-fashioned, a bit old school there. I think probably most people do notes in their phone. I can't do that. I'm not very good at that. But what I have done is I sometimes WhatsApp somebody and say, ignore this, I'm just sending it you to remind me. And quite often I email myself at night. I wake up in the middle of the night and I think about something, oh, I never did that. And then I email myself in the middle of the night, and then I surprise myself the next day that there's an email from me, and I'm, oh, I don't even remember sending it to myself. So finding a way of making sure that you're not missing tasks, I suppose, or writing something down to yourself, I think can be really helpful. So we've started you off with just a few of our, if you like, they call time management a soft skill. I think time management is actually a really hard skill. I don't think it's a soft skill at all, but it's called a soft skill in terms of thinking about skills. And maybe we've started you off with some of our softer tips for time management. We're going to come on to some of the harder stuff, some of the more difficult stuff after Kayleigh Rose has shared with you. But as I said to you at the start, I watched on YouTube one of Kayleigh Rose's videos, which was about time management, and it was brilliant. And I thought, right, when we're doing a time management session, we must ask Kayleigh to come back. If you've been to all of our webinars, and I could see earlier some of the people who are here have been regular attenders, then you'll probably recognise Kayleigh from our very first anti-racist webinar, which was about number 8 or 9 or something, really early on. And so we're very delighted that you've come back to join us, Kayleigh. So I'm going to hand over to you. You have to do that Chris Whitty thing and say when it's the next slide moving on and all of that, don't you? Because I've got the slides, but I'll hand over to you and I'll go on mute.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'd just like to say firstly that I'm really happy to be asked. It's so nice of you to say that you like that video of mine, and also I just generally appreciate what you're doing. I wish that something like this had been there when I was a student, and I think it can definitely help students and social workers, and I think it's great that they can all be watched back as well. But just to give a bit of information about me, so I'm a social worker in the northwest of England. I've had various roles. Some of them have been working in a really sort of secure environment where I've had a really good colleague that helped me early on in my career and really showed me a lot of skills around time management, and because she was really good at that. And I think having a mentor like that really helps. If you can get a supportive colleague early in your career, I think you've really hit the jackpot really with that. But then I've had different roles where I've worked with district nurses in the community, where I was a social worker working quite autonomously, and that brought with it new challenges really, because I was more a lone social worker, so I wasn't within a wider team of social workers, and I had a lot of health colleagues. So it was learning new skills around how to set boundaries around what you're doing and not just say yes to everything when maybe it wasn't within your remit. And I think that that's a big skill that you realise is so important in social work, to sort of know what is your role and what's other people's role. And people will often try and put responsibility onto the social worker for everything. And I think a real good time management tip is just to really put thought into that as well. So now I'm working within a wider social work team. So I sit with a lot of different social workers, different sort of levels of experience. And I think you just realize with everyone that it's like a never-ending battle of like learning these time management strategies, and sometimes pressures are different. So when I was working in the hospitals, it was all about getting people out and quick in that way. But then now with my longer term work, I have crisis stuff coming up, but then also you don't want to lose track of making sure that you're making real change for people, and that you are taking time to plan your work, and so that your work's really meaningful, and that you're going to have some real positive impact on people's lives as well. So I definitely think we always adapt and change to our circumstances. So time management, I think, is a really important area. So if we just go on to the next slide, please. So I've got this picture here because I feel like social work can often be like you're on a hamster wheel running towards a target that's constantly moving. And I think that's just because you never really feel that you're on top of everything. I don't ever feel that I am. And I think sometimes that can make you feel completely overwhelmed. And I just sort of wanted to mention that, like, as a new social worker, I really felt overwhelmed by that, because I've always been someone that tries to do my absolute best. And I think when we're working and we're trying to sort of support people, you kind of get the gravity of how important that is, because it's about people's lives. And you sometimes feel like if you're going to get something wrong, like it's all on you. But actually we work within a structure and a team. And I think it's always important to remember that there are other people around you. And I think I just wanted to acknowledge that, and how important it is to have sort of good boundaries. And when you are feeling like that, like everything's coming in at you, sometimes it's good to set time aside to actually talk to colleagues and see, you know, others that might feel the same, or get that support that you need. So I mentioned earlier around sort of understanding what's part of your remit. And I think that role clarity is something that you gain only over time. So if you are sort of newer to social work, sort of don't feel bad on yourself if you feel that you are accepting things or taking on work that maybe you realise after other people should have done, because it's all part of the learning. But that can help with sort of managing your caseload. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide now, if that's okay. So if you've watched my YouTube channel, you may have seen me going on about this tool that I developed. I've also written about it in community care, because I found that I really, when I developed this tool, it really helped me. And I think early on, one of the issues was that people would ring me and ask me about someone that was on my caseload, and maybe there'd be a family member and they'd just go straight into discussion about the issue at hand. So they might be feeling really stressed, and then I'd think, you know, they've got halfway through the 5th sentence and I'm thinking, I still don't know who you're talking about, and I feel really bad about this. So sometimes you don't even get a breath, do you? So I sort of went back to writing my caseload down, and then maybe writing some key details about each case, just so that it was kind of giving me prompts if that sort of situation happened. Because I think early on as well, there can be other things that make you nervous, like feeling like you might say the wrong thing on the phone in front of a team where you maybe feel that other people have more knowledge than you, even though you have to remember that you actually bring a lot of knowledge with you. But basically this down the side is everyone's names, and then I use background and key details about each person. I kind of keep on a note or a warning, just so I'm remembering anything that I might really need to know. So sometimes there might be a certain person that you're not allowed to give any information to, and sometimes having that prompt on the screen on your own notes can help you remember. And then you've got your to-do list as well. So the thing that I find useful about this is it kind of helps you to put more time into planning each individual case, rather than feeling like you're just planning everything you've got to do in the whole week, or putting your whole to-do list together. I kind of feel like I give people more time and attention. But I'm not saying everyone should do this, but it just helps me. And I suppose the principle behind it is to split things up into boxes or into sections, because I feel that having like some physical space on a page for me between people and details helps me, because sometimes it just feels like you've just got so much information. So in terms of the color coding, I think I'm just quite a visual person, so having those color codes did help me as a student, because if I realized that my entire page and my entire caseload was urgent, then it kind of indicates to you that maybe you need to get some help, because you can't deal with everything all at once. Also, having somewhere the green and it's done can kind of give you some relief as well. So if we go on to the next slide then. Here I just wanted to acknowledge that you don't always have time to sort of keep on track of those sorts of tools. So I try and actually keep time aside for doing something like that on a daily basis. But sometimes I think you can just have so many unexpected things happen, but you still feel like you've got a lot of information on your head that you just need to get down in order to organise later. So something that I do in those situations is I just make a quick note of everything that I've got to do. But for this piece that I've just got here, I just kind of wanted to show you that sometimes if you've got a lot of different tasks, sometimes it can be useful to write people's names within each task as well. So like all your assessments you've got to do and your visits and reviews, just so that you're not getting confused. So just another way of sort of creating some space between everything that you've got to do. And then I just wanted to raise really that a friend of mine has a really useful tool. She's a social worker with dyslexia, and I've left the link there, and I think the links can be accessed if you copy and paste that anyway. But she actually has some specific tools that can help people with dyslexia, and I feel like it's really hard when you've got so much information and there's so much paperwork to social work, that having tools specific for different people and different people's needs can be really helpful. So if we just go on to the next slide, please. I just jumped ahead with one of my points, I realised, but this was where I wanted to show you feel completely overloaded with information where you don't know where to start. So in those situations, I sometimes just go from top to bottom with my caseload and write people's initials and then the task that I need to do for each person. So sometimes obviously you might have multiple tasks, but sometimes it might just be one thing. But I think that can just help you with sort of remembering all of those things rather than it just running around in your head. So I tend to go from top to bottom with my caseload, because I feel that looking at it in that linear way can sometimes help you feel that you're going to make a note of everything rather than feeling like you might miss something with someone. Because sometimes when I'm writing like a to-do list and it's just coming out of my head, I might write something for someone and then realise I'm forgetting all sorts. And I just think going through your caseload in order often helps. And I know we all have different systems, but on Mosaic, which is the system we use, there is actually a button for printing your caseload, and I'm sure that they have it on most sites that people use. So then you can actually just print it out and write notes next to each one. So could we just jump ahead to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I've got this little sunshine there because I just wanted to sort of say that I think around your organisational strategies, they can really have an impact on how you feel. So I sometimes find that having a to-do list without any sort of structure to it can make me feel overwhelmed if I just feel like I'm never getting through it. Whereas sort of breaking your to-do list down into more manageable chunks, so say having sort of one little sheet of paper with 10 tasks, say, can really help, because then you don't feel like you're just never getting through a list that's like 100 tasks that you just never could do in a day. And I think that sort of checking off tasks and using that system can release dopamine in our brains, because it can make us feel light and happy to feel like we're actually getting through tasks. And I think when you break it down like that, you can sort of get that positive feeling, whereas you need to be careful of making, adding to that feeling of just feeling overwhelmed and like you just can't cope with the amount of tasks you've got to do. So Another thing that I've noticed some people do is writing a few tasks down on a sticky note, because then when you've done it, you can tick it off, but also you can crush it all up, and that just gives you an extra little bit there. If we just move on to the next slide, please. Another important thing around thinking about your wellbeing and what you've got to do as part of your caseload management is thinking about when you getting an understanding of your energy levels. So for me, I feel sort of like less energetic towards the end of the week, and maybe on a Friday I prefer to just get my paperwork done rather than be flying around on visits, because the problem with having a packed diary on a Friday is you often then have to do all your case notes, or if something urgent comes up you can't then address it as easily. So I like to have a bit of flexibility on that day if I can. But my energy in terms of like my focus with writing reports tends to be really good in the mornings. So I know for me, if I can put paperwork in towards the beginning of the day, that really works. But then towards sort of midday in the afternoon, I'm ready to do visits, so I can do a few, and then just make sure that I'm leaving time at the end of the day just to make sure I've got like my sort of my to-do list ready for the next day, or I've updated my table, and that I'm leaving space at the end of the day to make sure things are tied up if you can. So you have to be really flexible though, because you just don't know sort of when things are going to come up. So I use my online calendar and I do book things in, but I also don't make myself feel bad if I genuinely have to cancel something because something's come up. So say I had a general review and everything's ticking along just fine, and I have to cancel that because someone's in a crisis situation and you need to go straight away. I think you just have to realise that that's just part of being a social worker, and it's not like your fault. These things just happen. So I think that's something that I kind of helped me when I became sort of more experienced in things, because at first I found myself getting stressed when there was too much change in my diary. Another point I have is around time batching. So I often find that I'm very much more productive when I try and focus on similar tasks at certain times. So if I'm writing an assessment, say, I like to keep just writing an assessment rather than going from that halfway through, going for a visit and then coming back, writing a case note and on to the next thing. So I know that often social work is like that, but if you can try and organise it so it's not where you can, I think that can make you a lot more efficient. So like my example of on a Friday, I do tend to think if I've got a lot of assessments to write up, just sort of focusing on doing them for part of the day really helps me to get through things quickly. I think that in terms of your calendar, there are sort of differences that can happen. So I thought that Siobhan, you brought up a good point around making sure that you're leaving time for travel time and admin, because I think that's something you can easily forget. And I think it's about acknowledging that that needs to be protected to a certain extent, because I sometimes find that if people see that I've got an admin day, they'll just sort of ring me and then say, oh, you've got time to fit that in. And I think that can be a really hard conversation. But sometimes I do highlight with my manager, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be really behind and I'm just going to have to take another day to do this, and just sort of being open about it and saying like that's, it's just about acknowledging that and being honest, because sometimes I feel like it can be really hard to manage those issues. Could we just move on to the next slide, please? So I've got a couple of books that are quite mainstream books, but I think they're relevant to social work, and you'll see that the date on Stephen Convey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's quite an old book, but the principles of it I think are really useful. So there's the time management matrix, and it distinguishes between sort of different tasks and how we can sometimes get lost in managing things that are sort of not really urgent and busy in our time with certain things, like maybe that goes back to things that aren't really our role that we're getting sucked into, which can then tear us away from things that are really important and urgent. But we also, I feel that in social work there's often a problem that if we are overloaded with work and it's genuinely like not our fault, we can end up having so much that shouldn't be urgent that is urgent. And I think like this sort of matrix, if you look into it and read a bit more into it, you'll see that things sort of become a crisis situation just because you're so overloaded with work that everything needs to be done immediately. Like overdue reviews, for example, if you can't get to your reviews and they're all out of timescales, you may then get an email saying that you're on a red and you're really behind, but it's something that's actually going quite well, but it's now you have to deal with it straight away when maybe you've got more pressing things. So I think it's just kind of ways of thinking around why you may be struggling with the actual realities of what social work is like, and it's not always sort of, it's not necessarily your fault. Like you can't manage an unmanageable caseload. So things in the urgent column are like things where maybe it's a safeguarding and you need to deal with it straight away. So with those sorts of things, I also think about my report writing as well, and like getting your case notes on, you have to deal with those sorts of things. Your non-urgent but important things, they're things like around relationship building, and also, like I said before, about being on a community team. You want to make like meaningful change. If you're working with people for a long time, they're really important. So it's just around thinking about different ways of looking at your caseload. And then there's another book called Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. And what this made me think was around that sometimes we can put off certain tasks that would actually bring us the most value and would have big consequences if we didn't do them, because it causes us a bit of anxiety. So I find that on the phone, if someone's like sort of screaming at me, or if they're like picking up on everything I'm saying, I feel like they're writing it down and I'm going to say something wrong, can make me feel really stressed. And sometimes I had a tendency before of like leaving those things till the end of the day, or the end of the week even, and sometimes that can just make you feel completely burdened. And if you don't do them, it is going to have consequences. So it makes you, so sometimes thinking about doing those things earlier can really help. So I just found that book really helpful to think about that. And then I think that it's important to just sort of notice that doing things really quickly isn't always the best way, and like being productive isn't just about doing things as fast as you possibly can. So if we just go on to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to end my little talk by showing you a sloth, because the scientific name for a sloth is Bradipus, which means slow feet in Greek. And I think we should all think that obviously in social work, you can't always take it slow and steady because our workload just doesn't reflect that. But actually taking a moment to think about what you're doing sometimes helps. So an example recently is I was on duty and there was a situation where I needed to go to a property, and in the past maybe I'd have like rushed out of the door without any sort of preparation because I felt that the person was at risk. But I sort of learned over time that sometimes taking a second to just slow your thoughts down and just think, I need to plan this properly, helped me realize that I needed to go with the police and it wouldn't have been safe for me to go on my own. So I guess I just wanted to make the point that, and really clarify, like I don't necessarily think we need to do everything as quick as we possibly can. It's not always the way. Sometimes slowing down can make you feel a lot more happy. And back to the online calendar thing, leaving time and space to actually get things done without causing yourself loads of anxiety trying to get to places as fast as you can is really important, because I find that those little stresses that add up throughout the day are often the things that can cause the most horrible feelings in social work that builds up over time. So now I force myself to move away from my computer. If something comes in that's bothering me, or someone sends an email that's upset me, instead of just sitting there and thinking, oh, I don't have time to move away from my desk, I think, right, do you know what, I need to do that, because otherwise I might do a knee-jerk response to try and get rid of the situation and end up wasting loads of time worrying about it after. So maybe be a bit more like a sloth and do that. And I think that sort of reminding yourself to be present in the moment is really hard when you've got a lot to do, but I think it's important. And Richard Devine has a really good blog about this. But if you're in a car journey going somewhere, I sometimes used to just worry myself with everything I wasn't getting done in that time, like it was wasted time. And I have a bit of that urgency addiction to get everything done really fast, but actually just enjoying maybe some music or listening to an audio book that totally takes you away from even thinking about social work can help. And it's not a waste of time. Like, you have to have the journey, and just enjoying that time can make you appreciate being a social worker. Because something that's actually good about social work is sometimes those moments where you are in the car and just part of the community and enjoying it can make you think, oh, actually this job's quite good. So I think being present in those moments is nice as well. And also, you can be in a rush to sort of feel that you want to get back to the paperwork and stuff, but taking moments to really appreciate maybe a mini win of like something like a breakthrough with someone, or something maybe you'd have found really nerve-wracking in the past, but you feel you've built skills around, like chairing a meeting that you felt went really well. Maybe everyone else wouldn't have noticed it, but you should take time to notice it. And I often think the walk to the visit or in the car is the time to do it. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayleigh. That was great. And I love the idea of the sloth. It's also a lovely picture of a sloth, isn't it? But it links into, we've been talking, well, we talked recently about revisiting moral injury. In fact, I can't remember, was that even last week? I'm like, we've done so much since. So last week, okay. And one of the things we talked about in that was the need for slow ethics. And I think sometimes that bit about slowing things down, slowing down your thinking, as you described it, is actually really important for ethical practice and being values based in our practice. So that was really helpful. Thank you so much for that. I think there's been lots of comments in the chat, so you might want to join in with those, and maybe there's probably some questions in there for you, I'm not sure, but thank you so much for sharing with us there. Okay, one of the things that I took from listening to that as well, from listening to Kayleigh, was that bit about making the move into being a qualified social worker from being a student. And I suppose I'm thinking that when you're a student, not necessarily on placement, but when you're a student doing your, you're in lectures and you're writing your assignments, there is a lot to do, but you can feel like I've ticked all that off and I've done everything I have to do today. And you can finish the day feeling like I've done everything I have to do today. I don't think you can ever do that in social work. I think in social work, there's always, so I suppose the phrase that I liked that you used, Kayleigh, was feeling on top of everything. You don't get everything done, but you can feel on top of everything as a social worker. And it's about how we can move into that position of feeling comfortable that we've not done everything. You never can in social work. You can never leave social work feeling like, okay, I've ticked off everything that I needed to do. There's other jobs where we can do that. You can't do that in social work, but you can feel like I'm on top of things. And I think that's really helpful. So the tool that you've shared with us there, I think was very useful. So we're going to offer a few more bits of advice from me and from the team. Firstly, I think to-do lists. I think Kayleigh talked quite a bit about to-do lists, and Kayleigh also talked about stress and linking that. And I think that to-do lists can be a really good stress buster, really. Some people call them task lists, some people to-do lists. They are particularly helpful, I think, in terms of time management, but different people use different techniques. So if you're very new to to-do lists, you might want to think about, you might want to develop, and I think this is kind of just summarising really what Kayleigh has said to us, but you might want to develop one general to-do list or a number, what a to-do list for each piece of work. Or because of the role that I have, I work on lots of different projects, and I have a project list, and then I also have a general to-do list. Advice that's given about to-do list is that each task on the list should take no more than a couple of hours. So break down larger tasks. If I'm honest with you, my to-do list will have something that's massive that still needs to be done. But then when I come to that, I will break it down into smaller tasks. Lists should indicate which tasks are the highest priority, as Kayleigh said. I always think about that Stephen Covey thing about what's urgent and what's important and all that. I always think about if something's not urgent and not important, I don't think we ever get it done as a social worker. I think that fourth one never probably gets done. But that's what could take us into the next slide, which is how do you create a to-don't list? Some people find that indicating deadlines for each task is helpful. When does that need to be done? I don't do that, if I'm honest, because I find it puts me under too much pressure. I feel pressured by my to-do list, and I like my to-do list to be a stress buster rather than adding to stress. You need to maintain flexibility, as we've said throughout. There are lots of different ways of keeping to-do lists. There are online methods, you know, there's some apps that you can use now for breaking down your time, and there's other apps that you can use where it does like a time effective study on you, so you can put in what you've been doing and it'll give you feedback on what you could improve in terms of your time. There's loads of apps like that out there, and I think some people in the chat have been talking about apps that they find helpful. So you've just got to find something that works for you. The thing that has worked for me the most in over the last few years is not a to-do list, because I've kept to-do lists for years, so and I do find them very helpful. And sometimes on my to-do list is write a to-do list. I mean, I always think that makes me laugh when I put that on my to-do list. But the thing that I've found the most helpful in recent years is a to-don't list, or a don't do list. Some people call it a don't do list. I like to call it a to-don't because I have a to-do and a to-don't. But this is all about thinking about what shouldn't you be doing, what gets in your way, what's acting as a barrier to you getting the work done that you need to do. What could you safely let go of that's not important and isn't urgent, and it's that sits in that area really. They can be more challenging to create. I mean, it's very easy to create a to-do list, just sit down and work out all the things that you need to do, and then you add to them as you think about things, and it's very easy really. You have to be organized, I suppose, to keep on top of your list, but they're easy to do. Whereas a to-don't list is more difficult to do. But when I developed the skill, I found it has been a really powerful tool. It has enabled me to have more time for myself and more self-care. So there will be things like where, for example, I will think to myself, today I'm not going to look, and it might only just be one day, but today I'm not going to look at WhatsApp, or today I'm not going to do this, or today I'm not going to, because of other things that I've got to do, or because I just need some time for myself. But a to-don't list, I think, can be really helpful. So we've talked about to-do lists, to-don't lists, the whole thing about lists. I'm going to hand over to Kelly now, because lists and things takes us into the point that Kelly wanted to share. So I think I wanted Kelly to talk about her advice rather than everybody else's. I've kind of shared what they said in the WhatsApp group, but I wanted Kelly to share this for herself. So I'm handing over to you, Kelly, for a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Siobhan. Like Siobhan says, we often talk about the upcoming webinars in the WhatsApp group, and you always have to be careful of what you say, because Siobhan might say, yeah, that's great, say that, and sometimes you're joking and sometimes you're half joking, and this was one of those situations really. So for me, I really struggle with time management. I think a lot of people struggle with it, and some people struggle more than most. So on the next slide, you'll kind of see where I was coming from. So kind of, Siobhan says, any time management tips? And everybody put their really fantastic tips in, which, you've heard. And a lot of the tips were similar to what Kayleigh said. Some of them were a little bit different. And I was feeling a little bit cynical, really, because, throughout my life, I've tried pretty much every single technique in the world, it feels like, and still not been very good at time management. So kind of where I'm coming from is to check that you don't have any kind of neurodiversity. So if you do have any kind of ADHD or dyslexia or dyscalculia or autism or dyspraxia, if you are to have a look online, just do a really quick Google search, you'll find that lots of different conditions have lots of different difficulties associated with them, but time management difficulties they overlap so many areas, and I spent a lot of my kind of life really thinking, I'm trying so hard and I just don't seem to be able to manage it, and I'm trying lots of different things and nothing seems to be working. So if you do know that you have any kind of neurodiversity or neurodivergence, however you want to refer to it, if you know that about yourself, then you're going to have to work really hard on your time management skills. If you don't know that about yourself but you are struggling, kind of get that checked out, because it there may be something underlying there. So kind of that's where I was coming from, really, that you spend your whole life making lists and buying notebooks and gadgets and watching YouTube, and they're amazing things that work for the majority of people, but for some people you could still not be very good at it and have to work even harder. So what I've done on the next slide is I've kind of compiled what works for me. That's not to say that'll work for everybody, because like Siobhan said, we're not experts, but this is what works for me, and it works for some people that I've spoken to. So kind of for me, preparation is absolute key. Kind of create a system, or find out what your system is and tweak it, and maybe kind of take things from here and take things from there, and, you know, get yourself a system. Because if you do have any kind of neurodiversity that is kind of linked to anything to do with working memory or anything like that, you can do something and then forget you've done it, or you can try a technique and expect it to work instantly, and because it doesn't work on that occasion at that time with that task, that's it, I'm never doing it again. Didn't work, what's the point? That's waste of time. So you can kind of fall into that trap without even realise it. So kind of spend some time looking at how you work and what does work for you, and create your own system, and, you know, like I say, tweak it. So kind of you need to prepare for things. And a few people have mentioned this. Kayleigh mentioned it on Friday, like making a plan, and I think a few other people have mentioned it in the chat. So something that I do is I'll be honest, I don't always do it, but I try to never finish a day without doing a little bit of preparation for the next day. And I try on a Friday to kind of have a look at the week that's coming up, and just not to plan everything to the second, but just have a look at what's coming up. And one thing that's been really good for me on my final placement is my practice educator has really understood these difficulties and has worked really hard with me. So I've always had my weekly supervision towards the end of the week, kind of Thursday, Friday, and one of the tasks in that is let's have a look at the coming week. So it kind of makes me feel a little bit better that I've got a rough plan for what's coming up, and that I don't need to be thinking about that over the weekend, because it is really hard to switch off, isn't it? So kind of it always reminds me of a story a friend told me when she said when she used to, as a teenager, she used to go on nights out, she'd come back home and she'd get herself a glass of water and 2 paracetamol and leave them on the bedside table, because when she woke up in the morning, she'd be really thankful that she did that, and she'd be like, oh, last night me was really sensible. You know, it wasn't sensible going out for ages, but it was really sensible doing that bit of preparation, because in the morning that was what she needed. And so it's kind of like preempting things, so making a bit of a plan. A few people have mentioned this as well. One person definitely has mentioned this in the chat, but kind of estimate how long you need for certain tasks. I think Kayleigh touched on it when she said kind of time batching. So if you do have any kind of neurodivergence, you could experience kind of time blindness, or like the ability not to be able to estimate. So some people know how long a task is likely to take, and some people have no idea. Like it's a completely abstract concept. So if you need to time yourself doing something, then do that. If you're writing an assessment, time yourself how long it takes. And if you think it takes me about 2 hours, then you know it's about 2 hours. It may be a little bit shorter, it may be a little bit longer, but kind of time yourself, and, you know, time yourself how long it takes you to check it out on Google Maps, how long it takes you to drive somewhere, how long does it take you to leave the house, how long does it take you to write things up after a meeting. Kind of like Becky was saying, if you're chairing a meeting, you need time afterwards, or Siobhan says give yourself 10 minutes before. Like some people who are neurodivergent can't guess that, because it is a complete guess. There's nothing to base that on. So kind of if you physically have to time yourself, then do that, and then think about when would be the best time to do that. Because if you've only got an hour slot and something takes you 2 hours, is it better to do an hour? Can you come back to it? Will you remember where you were? Or is it better to get those 2 hours somewhere? And kind of look at where you do your work. I used to work in a school, and I used to have to deal with lots of figures. So because I've got dyscalculia, numbers are not great for me, but I can do it, but I'd need uninterrupted time. So I spoke to my line manager and said, on a Monday morning, I'm going to come in at 7:30 instead of 8, because there's nobody else in school, few members of staff, but there's no students, there's nobody knocking on my door like, miss, There was none of that. And I put a sign on my door and I would just work uninterrupted for half an hour. And that was better than spending 3 hours with interruptions. So kind of planning your day is like really important. And I'd say it's really important to kind of increase your focus, because if you do get distracted with things, commit to a task, like writing an assessment or case notes or reading or anything, commit to it for a set amount of time. And don't deviate from that. I've read lots of things online that say 25 minutes, and I personally think that's too long. So if you're going to commit to doing something for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then set your timer and work on it until that timer goes off. If you need to go to the printer, or you need to go to the toilet, or you just need to email this person, or you just need to speak to that person, you can leave it. Similar to what Siobhan was saying, you know, commit to doing a task for that long and build breaks in. If you know, if you really need a break, you're going to get one in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, so kind of commit to that. Something that I do is, I've said kind of use a timer. I don't use a timer on my phone, a separate little timer. Sometimes I have to do a bit of maths and things if I'm adding up scores from like self-rating worksheets and stuff. I've got a calculator, because if I pick my phone up, I'm not doing the adding up or setting the timer. I'm looking at my phone and there's a notification, and I'll just look at that up and kind of go back to basics and use a calculator and a timer and a notepad. If you think, I just wanted to speak to that person, I just wanted to speak to this person, and I meant to look this up, you can write all that down at the side of you, and that list will still be there when you've finished your task. If you break off to do something, how likely are you to get back to that? So kind of just going straight back to the beginning, create a system that works for you and try to stick to it and get people to support you. If you don't need distractions, or you can't work with distractions, find somewhere you can work without distractions, or tell people what you're doing. I need to do this task, so I need to do it here, or I need to do it at home, or I need to do it earlier or later. Kind of make sure people are supporting you, and yeah, create your own system.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm just going to say that whatever you feel about your time management skills, I think your time management skills are excellent. You've been a team member since the start, and everything, I know if I ask you to do something, it will be done, and it will be done in time, and it will be, so I think you're underestimating your own time management skills there. But I also think that the tips and hints that you've given there will be brilliant for people, and not just the neurodivergent brain, as you've described it there, but I think for everybody there's something we can take from there. So but you know that, you know, since I had my stroke, I have some of the issues that may come also from ADHD. So you know, interesting. I think what I didn't realize was what you said there about how there are so many different issues around neurodiversity, but actually time management underpins all of them, or I didn't realize that. So that's really helpful to know. So thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so we're coming almost to the end. We've saved, if you like, our top tip for the end of the session tonight. Our top tip is learning how to say no. It is an essential skill in social work for whatever it is learning how to say no. And like, it was making me laugh a little bit there, Kelly, because you were saying, you know, when I say in the WhatsApp, has anybody got anything for this? And if anybody ever said no, it would be fine, but no one ever does. So, but it is, if you wanted to say no, that's okay. Although the last couple of weeks we have had that more, haven't we? Because we've been talking about saying no. So I remember, I think Kai said something, thank you for the kind invitation. It was marvellous. And then, but no, I think it was brilliant the way, I can't even remember what it was now, but I think learning to say no is so important in terms of not taking things on. And I think it's very easy for us to do as social workers. You know, social workers we're under pressure, but we recognise that our managers are also under pressure. They're under pressure to allocate work. We know that there are deadlines. We know that people have needs that can't necessarily wait. And so that means that often social workers just take too much on, and we do have too much on. Now, there is advice, loads of different advice from all over the place that you can get about how to not take too much on. But I find it doesn't really relate well into social work. So a lot of time management hints and tips don't come from social work, do they? So McGregor talks about in a community care article in 2010, talked about how to turn down unreasonable work requests, but just said, know when you've reached your limit, manage your own feelings, be assertive, prepare in advance, and then doesn't tell you what to do other than that kind of, okay, so then how do I do it? I do think that's really important advice, knowing when you've reached your limit. Managing your own feelings about that is very important. Being assertive and preparing, but then when you go into that conversation of turning it down, where do we go with that? So that's what we're going to try and cover now. I find that there's a 4-stage process that I think works really well, and it's based on psychology really, but I think we could take it really around thinking about courageous conversations and building from that into learning how to say no. If you feel that you are at your working capacity and you need to say no, then try what I'm about to go through with you step by step. The key thing though is, as McGregor said, you've got to manage your own feelings. Do not wait until you're like at screaming pitch before you bring this in, because then it won't work. You're going to be so cross and so you know what I've got on, or it won't work. You need to be calm when you're going into this. But these 4 stages, I genuinely think these work. And anybody who's said to me, I tried the 4 stages and it didn't work, when we've reflected on it, they didn't maybe do it in exactly this way. I think you've got to be really quite clear about using these 4 stages. But this is what I would suggest. First of all, show that you've heard the person. That's really important. I mean, these 4 things are what we should do in any courageous conversation. So show that you've heard the person. So in relation to saying no, if you like, to taking on more work, you need to show that you know that this person wants to take you on more, wants you to take more on. They don't need to keep telling you, because you've said to them, I recognise you want me to take on 2 more assessments, or I recognise that you want me to go and do that visit today, whatever it is that they've asked you to do. You then show empathy with their position. So you're saying, I know what you want me to do. That's stage 1. And I understand why you want me to do it. It's your what and why. I understand, that you've got to allocate cases to meet deadlines. I know that we've been directed that we're not allowed to have a waiting list, and therefore you've got to pass this on. And whatever it is, you understand. Show empathy. You show that you understand why. You understand why they're doing it. You have empathy. Then explain your position clearly, very clearly. And I think this is where lots of people think, well, my manager knows what I've got on. Do they really? I was speaking to a manager today who manages 14 different staff members. How do they know every single thing that worker's got on? They don't. They can't retain all of that information. So you do need to explain clearly. I'm at capacity at the moment. I can't take on any more work. I'd be likely to make mistakes. Deadlines wouldn't be met. This wouldn't be ready for court. Whatever it is, explain your position clearly. You've demonstrated that you understand their position. Now you need the person to understand your position. That's that exchange. It's that exchange of conversation. And then provide an option. You need to end on a positive. We know that everything should end on a positive, so you're ending on a positive. So you're saying something like, I'll be able to complete the assessment I've got with the stepping family this week. I'll have that done by Thursday. Once that's been agreed and signed off, then I'll be able to take on these new referrals. So could we talk about it again on Friday? What you're doing is you're giving an option. You've not started or ended with a no. In fact, if you work through those 4 stages really carefully, you've not actually used the word no, but you are communicating very clearly a no. So that's my advice. I know that you will all be there saying, well, it isn't that easy, Siobhan. It doesn't work like that. It's not going to work. It does, it's not like that. What I'd say to you is, I know all of the techniques. I know all of the tools that, managers will do things saying to you, like if you're new, or if you're a student or you're a newly qualified worker, you'll hear things like, this will be a really good learning opportunity for you. If you're an experienced worker, then it'll be like, you've really got the skill set that I need in this piece of work. Or, you know, you're the only person I can ask to take this on because I know that you'll be able to do this job really well. Or it'll be, well, you said that you were interested in working with. So all of those will come in. You've got to remember, it is not your responsibility to manage your manager's stress. Okay, you understand all of the pressure that's on your manager, but ultimately that isn't your responsibility. You need to protect your ability to work effectively with the work that you have allocated to you. So don't think to yourself, oh, you know, that poor family, that poor person, they're not going to get, they've got this need. But then if you take that on, what about the other people that you're working with? They're not going to get. If your manager is insistent and doesn't take no for an answer, if you like, then I would do several different things. If you're feeling like this is just overloading me completely now, then I would make a formal request for a meeting, and I would ask your manager to go through your workload with you. I'd take a tool, something like Kayleigh shared with us earlier, that summarises everything and all the tasks that you've got to do. And then I would ask your manager for their advice on how they think you can take on more whilst maintaining quality and effectiveness and the standards that are required in the work that you've already got on. Make sure that all of that is recorded. What's really important is that sometimes a manager will come along and say to you, oh, this is urgent. You know, you've got I think Kayleigh described it earlier as an admin day. You've got admin in your calendar, you've got an admin day. I really need you to go off and do this. And you can leave those, the admin. Well, you need to know, if I'm leaving the admin, then if I'm going to go on, some authorities have, like, you'll go on red if you've not met your deadlines, or you know, well, when I go on red, who's going to say it was okay for me to leave that stuff? You're taking the responsibility. So make sure it's all recorded. Email your thoughts to your manager. Tell them why you can't take on more work. Spell out your workload. Tell them you've got concerns about your ability to manage it effectively. Use the 4-stage process in the email. Keep a record of the time that you spend on different activities, asking managers to advise which of these activities you should let go of so that you can take on more work. Show that your working week is there. See, I know some people where in their local authority, they have kind of weighted, instead of having case numbers, they've weighted work in terms of the hours it might take. And so they'll allocate to you. I know people who've got an 80-hour week allocated to them. Their manager knows it's impossible. How does that happen? This is what we've got to start to ask ourselves. I think we can't just say I've got too much on. We need to provide a really clear evidence base. Your manager then has the clear evidence base to take to their manager. So that's, I suppose, one way of you assisting them with dealing with their stress. I do agree social workers have a lot on, but likewise, I think as a profession, we have got to make a stand now. We've got to make clear what is workable and what isn't. And if your workload is too high, then you do need to look at your own role within that, what you can do about that, how you can change that. If you're working with an automated system, because some of you will be saying, you know, I don't get the opportunity to talk to my manager and say I don't want to take on these 2 cases because they just land in my box, you know, then follow the same advice. Spend some time reflecting on why the system doesn't work. Is there anything that you could do, or is there anything that you could stop doing that might help you to manage this workload? Ask your manager to go through your workload with you. Record what you're not able to do and why you can't do it. Again, record the time you're spending on different activities. And I've highlighted it. It says the same thing. We've got a lot on, but we all know that. And actually, there's a lack of evidence of that because we don't spend the time providing the evidence. We just say we've got too much on, we've got too much on, we've got too much on. All the social workers can agree, oh, I know what that feels like. Yes, we've all got too much on, but nobody else can see that because we're not providing the evidence of that. So I think we've got to take some responsibility there in relation to that. So as a summary, find out what works for you, because different things will work for different people. And there'll be a couple of things that will really work for you. I remember a manager saying to me years ago in one of my first roles, really, and it was when we were all still paper-based, and she said, "Siobhan, my best advice I can ever give you is only touch one piece of paper, only touch each piece of paper once. Don't shuffle all your pieces of paper about and think, oh, I'll do that another time, I'll do that another time, I'll do that another time, and you're touching every kind of piece of paper 100 times. Just do it when it's there. Just only touch every piece of paper once." And ever since, I kind of try and use that. It doesn't always work, but I try and use that and think of that, even though it might not be a piece of paper I'm touching. I always think about, remember when Joe said, when you touch each piece of paper once. So find what works for you. Ask other people what works for them. So help them with their time management, but also it might work for you. Don't expect miracles. Don't expect instant change in this, but do recognize that some things can be really helpful, and you might take one hint from tonight and you might go with that, and it might be really helpful. And if the hint that you take from tonight is, look, there might be an issue here around neurodivergence, then go and explore that for yourself. Recognize that what helps you might change over time. So what helped you 2 years ago might not be helpful to you anymore, or maybe it's so ingrained in what you're doing now, you could actually look for a new technique that you could use. Remember that you can only do what you can do, and just keep working on it. Just keep working on your time management. Lots of the things that we've shared in lots of the different webinars will work. One of the things that's come through very clearly tonight is Friday. Friday, you know, is actually a really key time for planning what you're going to be doing next week. For me, it's a Saturday because I work on a Saturday and I use the Saturday to plan my next week. So maybe a Friday. It becomes the part of your next week. It stops all that Sunday evening bothering and anxiety and all of that. We've talked about that when we talked about reflective journaling. We talked about the key time for reflective journaling is the end of a week, because that becomes the beginning of your next week. So lots of these things connect together. Social work skills are fully connected. So thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you found it useful. Thank you very much to Kayleigh for joining us and sharing all of her ideas with us tonight. That was really helpful. Next week, we've got a back to basics session, which we've said we'll do on relationship-based practice. And just thinking about time management means we've got to pull that together in the next few days, but that's what we will do as a team. So next week, we will be doing relationship-based practice. And then we are really looking forward to social work and mental health, where actually some of our regular audience members are going to step up and take the lead and share with us the context of working within, as a social worker, within mental health. We're back then into reflective practice again, back to basics, and then we will continue with our anti-racist commitment by looking at adultification. So that's what we've got coming up over the next few weeks. Look forward to seeing you in the future. I imagine that the team have just put the link in the chat for next week. I can see Chris and Kelly nodding at me there. Fabulous. Thank you ever so much, and good night, everybody. Bye.